Hey everyone! In today's video, I'm sharing some of my favorite Dollar Tree Tumbling Tower block DIYs. These projects are super fun and easy to make, so gather your supplies, settle in, and let's get creative together. Dollar Tree's Tumbling Tower blocks are hands down one of my favorite crafting supplies. I love crafting with these. For this DIY, I'll be using a box of these wooden tumbling tower blocks. One box comes with 72 blocks, and for this project, I'll be using 36 blocks. I'll be staining the blocks with this Americana gel stain from Deco Art in the shade Walnut. So I just apply that on the blocks, and I'm using a cloth here, but you can also use a brush. Now immediately after I apply the color, I wipe it down, removing the excess stain. Now for these blocks, I'm applying the stain on one wide side. This is the only surface that's going to be seen. Also, I'll be applying glue all over the sides, so I want to make sure I don't get glue on those areas and just keep it bare. Now because I'll be using wood glue, I always prefer to stain the wood first. Glue tends to seep out between the joints, and once that dries, it's really difficult for the wood to absorb the stain. I'll be using two of these thick wood blocks from Dollar Tree. Now one is going to be the top and the other the base of the riser. And I'm going to stain them as well, but before I do that, I do sand the ends first, or the end grain as you can see here. Otherwise, it's going to soak up a lot of stain. So sanding or sealing really helps to close the wood pores a bit. Now on the wood blocks, I'm only going to apply the stain on one surface side and the edges. The surface on the opposite side isn't going to be seen. It's going to be covered up, which you'll see later, so I leave that side unstained. For the other block, it's going to be the base, so you can stain it the same way or just the sides. I realized I wanted a little contrast with the blocks. Looking back, I kind of wish I painted it a different color, so I decided to add another layer of the stain to deepen the color. I'm going to be gluing the blocks together, but before I do that, I turn them all over so that when I glue them together, the blocks will look nice and flush when I turn it over. I'm gluing the blocks together side by side, and I'm using wood glue from Dollar Tree. So I'm just going to continue to glue the blocks together until I have 11, and I make 2 sets. After that, I glue 7 blocks together side by side, and I make 2 sets. Once it's completely dried, I turn them all over, and then I'm going to glue all 4 together to form a rectangle. So I apply some wood glue on the sides of the 7, and I place those in between the ends of the longer side like so. And I just make sure that the corners are at a 90-degree angle. Now I did clamp it with some painter's tape on the sides while it dried. And once that's completely dried, I'm going to touch up the unstained area. The tumbling block rectangle is going to be placed in between the wood boards, and the blocks are slightly smaller than the boards, so I'll be applying a little bit of stain on the outer edge of the wood board. I make sure not to take it too far in, so I'm still gluing bare wood to bare wood. And then I touch up the blocks that didn't get stained. Finally, I apply some glue on the ends of the blocks, and I flip it over and I place that on top of a wood board, and I just make sure that it's centered. And then I do the same thing and apply some glue on top of the blocks, and then I place the wood board right on top. The riser is all done. It turned out so beautiful. It feels very sturdy and solid. You can place whatever you want on top, like plants or candles. It's perfect. I'm going to be using 16 tumbling tower blocks and about 5 craft cubes, both from Dollar Tree. I'm going to glue 4 blocks together to form a cross, and to get all the sides even, I'm going to cut down 2 blocks to about 1 5/8 of an inch, and I just use a miter box and saw to do that. Once that's cut, I glue them together like so to form a cross. Then I apply the glue on the 4 ends, and I take a block, stand it upright, and glue those together like so. And I do that for all sides. And this is going to be a perfect base for a cylinder vase, or even those little bowls that I used in the first project. Then I get a craft cube and glue 4 tumbling blocks around it. Then I apply glue on the ends and attached a craft cube on each block. I turn it over and I glue 4 additional blocks, standing upright on the edge of each cube. I'm going to add some color using Waverly Antique Wax, and I apply that with a damp cloth and I wipe off the excess, and this will give it a very rustic finish when it dries. It's so adorable. I just love how it turned out. I place a glass bowl and a cylinder vase on top, both from Dollar Tree, and I am done. If you enjoyed this video, will you please give it a thumbs up? I picked up this little textured vase from Dollar Tree, and I want to make a wooden stand for it. For this project, I'm going to be using about 24 tumbling tower blocks. I want the wood to be dark, so I'm going to stain in the shade Dark Walnut from Minwax, avoiding the ends, which I will touch up later. I start by gluing 2 blocks together end to end, and I'm going to make a total of 6 sets. Then I glue 3 blocks together end to end, and I make 4 sets. Next, I take 4 glued blocks of 2, and I'm going to glue them together to form a rectangle like so. I start by making a U shape or C shape, and then I glue the remaining side. For the glue blocks of 3, I glue 3 together, forming a U, and I make 2 of those. Then I apply some glue on the ends of the U-shaped box, and I turn that over and glue that on top of the rectangle on the shorter side like so. And I glue the other U the same way on the opposite side. For the base, there are a few alternatives. You can get one of those Dollar Tree planks and trim it down to fit with a miter box and saw, and have it rest on top of the blocks like so. Or you can have that go inside of the rectangle, gluing some tumbling blocks inside to hold it in place, or you can use some square dowels in place of the blocks. But I wanted a perfectly fitted base, since the rectangle base was a little bit narrower, so I trimmed down this Dollar Tree wood square for a perfect fit. And I just scored it several times with a utility knife. I stain it with the same dark walnut color, and I drop it in place, and this DIY is done. Final DIY, I'm going to be using this small wooden tray from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this blue rub-on transfer from Dollar Tree as well. And I'm going to be adhering that onto the surface of the tray. So I trim the transfer so that it will fit nicely inside the tray because it's a little bit larger. I peel off the white backing paper and I place that inside the tray, and if I measured and cut correctly, it should fit nicely inside. I use the scraper to rub and go over the transfer a couple times, and then I get my little tiny scissors with a very pointy tip to pull back a corner of the transfer. It is really snug inside the tray. To transfer, I just rub all over while gently pulling back the clear sheet. If it doesn't completely transfer, then I just lay it back down and I just rub it over it again with a popsicle stick, which actually worked better than the Dollar Tree scraper. So I just take my time with it. I don't want to rush it, and eventually I get all the transfer down in one piece. I love the blue pattern against the natural wood, which is why I decided to leave the tray as is. I'm going to need 4 tumbling tower blocks and 4 craft cubes, and I'm going to glue them together like so. I'm going to stain them with the same stain I've been using throughout this video from Bear in the shade Special Walnut. I also make sure to stain the sides of the cubes because that part can be seen a little bit, and I do wipe down the blocks to remove any stain that hasn't absorbed. Next, I get some jute cord and I just wrap that around the handles. I use a little bit of hot glue to hold it in place, and I just wind it around, and then I secure the ends with hot glue. And this is going to match the stained blocks nicely. Then I hot glue the blocks underneath on each corner. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and click that notification bell so that you don't miss any of my new videos. And finally, I brush on some clear wax all over to protect the transfer as well as the raw wood, but you can also use Mod Podge or whatever sealant you prefer. And we are done. I hope you all enjoyed that project as much as I did. I also hope you're all having a great summer so far and staying cool. It's been a pretty hot summer, and even with our AC running, there always seems to be a few rooms in the house that just never seems to get cool enough. Always have to keep the blinds or the curtains closed. And so I just wanted to thank Costway for sponsoring today's video. They were kind enough to send me this portable air conditioner. This is the 8000 BTU portable air conditioner with dehumidifier function. It's perfect for cooling, dehumidifying, fanning, and even has a quiet sleeping mode. So let's unbox this together. Now, to be honest, I really don't enjoy reading through manuals. I usually let my husband do that, but he was out of town when I was filming this, so it was all on me. But oh my goodness, this was so easy to set up. Not too many parts to assemble, it really is just the AC unit, window seal plate, the exhaust hose, and the remote control. So I'm just attaching the exhaust hose to the back unit, and it snaps right in. On the other end of the hose is where I attach the exhaust hose adapter, and you just twist that right in. And that attaches onto the window kit seal plate. And then I fit that right in the window. The AC unit is super versatile with cooling, dehumidifying, fanning, and sleeping modes. It also has 2 fan speeds, a really strong airflow rate, and it can cool spaces up to 230 square feet. Now, I really like that there's a remote control so that you can easily adjust the settings without getting up. Plus, it has a 24-hour programmable timer to save energy. Now, if you're worried about water overflow, it does have a water full warning and a 10-feet drain hose to keep your floors dry. Once you're all set up, you can easily move it around. There are 4 casters on the bottom. And again, setup was really easy, so you can take it down and move it from a bedroom to your home office or any area of your house. I like that it's also small and compact, so it's really easy to store it away until you need it. And that's it. This is definitely perfect for those areas in your home that just can't seem to cool down, an enclosed patio, or a pool house. So if you're interested in checking this out, I do have a 10% off coupon code, and I'll have that link below. Thanks again to Costway for sponsoring today's video. For the next DIY, you will need 48 tumbling tower blocks, which I got from Dollar Tree, and 4 square planks from Dollar Tree as well, which comes in a pack of 6. So buy a pack and that will cover you for DIY 1 and 2. The first thing I do with the 48 blocks is glue 2 blocks together at a time, end to end. I am going to make a 2-piece square wooden riser stand, so it's going to be a set. I'm using wood glue, but you can use whatever glue you prefer. And then once that's all glued, I glue them together like so to form a square. And you just want to make sure you're forming a square and not a rectangle. If you look at the side of the square, and it looks kind of asymmetrical because of that one bottom end glued to the side, then you're gluing it correctly. And in the end, you should end up with 6 squares. To make the first riser, you are going to need 4 squares. And I'm going to glue them on top of each other, alternating that bottom end to the left and right as I stack them. So it kind of makes a nice pattern. And I will be staining this once it's all glued together, so I'm making sure to apply just enough glue, not too much, so that it doesn't seep out onto the wood surface. After I glue 4 together, I glue the remaining 2 together, alternating that bottom end as well. And this is going to be the shorter of the 2. I'm going to be gluing these square planks on the top and bottom of the stacked squares so that it makes a tumbling block sandwich. By itself, these planks are quite thin, but by having the tumbling blocks in between, it gives the illusion that it's a little more substantial than it really is. I gave it a quick sanding just to remove any glue that may have gotten on the surface before I stain. But again, a quick fix if it does is to dab a little matching acrylic paint just to give it some coverage. I love how it's looking already. You can leave these as is, paint them, or stain them, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stain them in the shade Dark Walnut from Minwax. With a cloth, I apply that all over. I love this shade. It's a very rich and deep color. Then I stain 4 craft cubes, which I will be gluing on the bottom of the larger riser. A beautiful way to add some height and elevation to your decor, perfect for displaying or showcasing some of your favorite spring decor or any decor. You will need 74 tumbling tower blocks. So 1 box, which comes with 72, plus 2 more pieces. I glue 3 blocks together at a time and I end up with 14 of these. I'm going to glue 5 of them in a row, separated by 1 block positioned vertically in between and in the ends. And I make 2 sets of these. For the 4 left over, I glue 2 at a time like so. Once that is dried, I'm going to glue them together to form a rectangle. And I glue the smaller sides in between the longer sides. To make the base, you will need about 17 jumbo craft sticks. I believe I got these at Dollar Tree, and I lay them out side by side, then place a rectangle box on top and trace the inner area of the box. Then I trim the sticks down. I'm going to add some color using Waverly Antique Wax, and I do this before applying the base, but you can definitely stain or paint after once everything is complete. I do like to paint underneath, and once that base is on, there's going to be areas that will be a little hard to reach, so I just paint it all before. Once I finish the rectangle, I apply the wax on the tumbling blocks and craft sticks. To make the base, I place 6 blocks on each side, then I glue them in place. Then I place the craft sticks down, and I'm just seeing how well they lay because I don't want there to be any gaps. I want a tight fit.
And then I glue the sticks down like so, and I did have to cut a little piece to fill the little gap in the end. Look how gorgeous this looks. Now you can stop here. I think it's adorable just like that, but I do want to add handles. So I glue 4 tumbling blocks together to form a C, with 2 blocks in the middle laying flat and 2 on the ends laying on its side. Then I apply the wax to match. I glue it in place and I am done. This came out so beautiful. You can use it as a planter, a flower box, or even as a decorative organizer. And the best part is that this costs just about $8 to make. Thank you so much for watching.
Dollar Tree has a variety of beautiful adhesive wall tiles, and for this project, I will be using this gorgeous blue and white tile. I'll also be using this Crafter Square round plywood. I'm going to trim the tile to fit nicely on the wood round. So first, I'm going to peel off the backing to expose the adhesive, and I place the wood round right on top. I trim off the excess tile with a utility knife. Now the adhesive on the tile is only attached and sealed on the outer end, so once I trim that out, the tile will separate. So I peel the adhesive off the wood and I attach the tile onto the wood using a multi-surface glue, but definitely use your preferred glue. I'm going to be using about 32 tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using 32 wooden cubes from Dollar Tree as well. First thing I need to do is to make sure that the cubes are all similar in height, since the wood round will be resting on top of them. I'm going to keep the blocks in their natural color, but you can certainly paint or stain them as well. Next, I'm going to glue a cube to one of the blocks, like so. As I mentioned earlier, the wood round will be resting on top of the cubes, which will not be visible. The cubes are just there to provide some support in gluing the blocks to the round. To glue the blocks, I start by placing 4 blocks around the wood round, positioning them opposite each other. Then I apply some glue on top of the cube to glue it in place. And then I glue the rest of the blocks, spacing them out evenly. Now I'm using wood glue, but you can certainly use hot glue as well. You can also add more blocks. The blocks are spaced out, but you can definitely fill in those gaps. And then I glue the rest of the blocks, spacing them out evenly. And this little tray is done. You can place little plants or anything decorative on top. I really love how this turned out.
I have 14 blocks left from the prior project, and I'm going to use 8 of them for this DIY. I'll also be using this polyester desk organizer from Dollar Tree. I love the pattern on this one. And 1 rectangle wood plank or slat. This came in a pack of 6, and I had 1 left from a prior project already stained with watered down acrylic paint. First, I take 2 blocks and glue them end to end. Then I take another block and I glue that standing upright on the end of one side. And then I glue another block on the opposite side. And then I repeat that and make another set. You can paint or stain these, but I am going to leave it natural. We are almost done. This DIY takes only minutes to complete. Then I drop in the plank. And I place the glued blocks underneath the organizer, 1 on each end. And that is it. A very easy hack to turn this desk organizer into a little planter. I love how it turned out.
For the next DIY, I'm going to be making a planter box centerpiece. I'll be using about 40 tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I stain them in the shade Dark Walnut from Minwax, avoiding applying stain on the ends, which I will touch up later. Once that's dried, I glue 5 blocks together end to end, and I glue 4 sets of these. Then I glue 2 blocks together end to end, and I make 8 sets of that. To assemble the box, I'm going to form a rectangle with the glued blocks.
I glue the ends of the longer blocks onto the end of a shorter block, like so. That way it's easier to glue the other end in place. And I make 2 sets of these. For the sides of the blocks, I'm also going to be forming a little rectangle, gluing a single block on each end of the glued blocks of 2. But instead of gluing the other side in the same position, I'm going to lay it on its side like so. And this will just be a little added decorative detail for the side of the box. It's kind of like a handle. To fill in the sides, I'm going to be using some of these thick skewers that I have on hand. You can also use Dollar Tree skewers, which are a little bit thinner, or even some round dowels. So I measure that and I trim 5 for each long side. Now you don't want the sticks to go more than halfway the width of the blocks on each side. For the smaller side, I measure and trim as well, and I'll be gluing 3 on each side. I trim the sticks down with my miter shears, and then I paint them with some sample paint, which is similar to a white with hints of light gray. Now I always like to have the smoother side of the blocks showing, which is the side that's face down when gluing together. Not all blocks are equally cut, so the uneven side is where I'm going to glue the sticks so that I have a nice smooth front. I'm using wood glue from Dollar Tree, and I start gluing the middle stick first, and then I glue the ends, and then the remaining 2. And I do the same thing on the second rectangle. For the smaller rectangle, I glue 3 on each side like so. Now I'm going to glue the smaller rectangle on the outer end of the longer rectangle. So the box is going to be a bit narrower, but if you want it to be less narrow, then you can glue the sides in between the longer rectangles. And that will just extend that middle area a bit more. So I glue the sides together and then I clamp it a bit, giving the glue some time to dry. To make the base, I'm going to be using some popsicle sticks and a couple square dowels, but you can also use tumbling blocks in its place. I trim the popsicle sticks and the dowels to fit, and then I stain them with the same dark walnut stain. I glue them in place, and this DIY is done. I bought this pack of 4 tea light candle holders from Dollar Tree, and I wanted to make a rustic wooden holder for them. And I'm going to be using a box of Dollar Tree's tumbling tower blocks to build it. The blocks come in a pack of 72. I'm going to be using about 58 blocks, leaving me left with 14 blocks, which I will be using in the next DIY. I make a square with 4 blocks and I glue them together like so, and I make 4 sets of these. I'm using wood glue that I got from Dollar Tree, but you can use your preferred glue, and I'm making sure to wipe out any excess glue that squeezes out before it dries in case I want to stain it later. Next, I gather 21 blocks. I take a block and lay it on its side, and then I glue 4 blocks flat, side by side next to that. And then I take another block and glue it on its side again, just like the first one. And then I glue down another 4 flat, side by side next to that. Then I just repeat the pattern with the rest of the 21 blocks, ending with a block on its side. Then I make another matching set with 21 more blocks, and these will make the sides of the wooden holder. So to assemble, I stand up one of the rectangle pieces, and then I make sure the square pieces fit nicely like so. I apply glue on the left and right sides of the square, and then I attach the other rectangle side. I'm going to add some color with Waverly Antique Wax. I apply that with a foam brush, applying in sections, and then with a damp cloth I wipe out the excess before it dries. And I really wipe it down so that this will dry to a nice rustic shade and texture. So I just continue applying the color all over and wiping out the excess before it dries with a damp cloth. This dries beautifully. I place the candle holders in them, which fits perfectly, and I drop in the tea light candles. I also bought this 4-pack votive candles with a vanilla scent from Dollar Tree, and these also fit in the candle holders. But looking at it, I didn't want the votive candles sticking out, so I replaced the glass with these larger ones instead. I really love how this turned out. Okay, for this project, I'll be making a lantern and I'll be using 36 blocks. I'll be staining with acrylic paint, apple barrels, territorial beige, and khaki, thinned out with a little bit of water. So I brush that on and then immediately wipe it down with a clean cloth before it dries to remove the excess paint. Now I do apply the paint all over the surface and the sides, except for the ends because that's where I'll be applying glue. So first I'm going to be forming a square with 4 of the blocks. So I just apply a little wood glue on the ends and I form a square. This carpenter square from Dollar Tree really helps. I always love using this, especially when I'm working with these blocks. Now I make 2 sets of the square, and then I'm going to take 4 more blocks and glue them right on the unpainted ends, and I add that on both of the squares. So these 2 are going to make the top and the base of the lantern. Next, I'm gluing 5 blocks together end to end. Now I know I'm kind of speeding through this, but after I glue them together, I do hold them together for a few minutes to give the wood time to bond. But with that said, this glue does dry really fast compared to some of my other favorite wood glues. And I love the little nozzle on this one, especially when you're working with these little blocks. To assemble, I'm going to be gluing the blocks of 5 vertically on those unpainted ends. So I put some glue on an end and then I take the glue blocks and holding it vertically, I attach the end of that one on the end with glue. So it makes a 90-degree angle, and then I take a little square dowel and I use that to push the 2 together. It also helps make sure that it's standing at a 90-degree angle, otherwise you're going to have a crooked looking lantern. And I do the same thing on all 4 sides. By the way, if you guys are enjoying these budget Dollar Tree DIYs, don't forget to give a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so that you don't miss out on any future thrifty creations. Okay, I give the blocks a little time to bond and then I flip it over, and then on that square piece, which is going to be the base, I apply some glue on those unstained ends. And then I very carefully match up the 2 pieces together so that now I have a top and a bottom. You can place some candles inside or a little faux plant. That Dollar Tree glass plate candle holder also fits nicely inside. It's so simple and stunning. For the first DIY, you will need about 57 tumbling blocks, which I got at Dollar Tree, and 31 jumbo craft sticks. The first thing I did was stain the blocks and craft sticks with Minwax stain in dark walnut. Staining individual blocks can be a tediously long process, so instead I group 5 blocks together like so and apply the stain, wipe out the excess, then turn all 5 over at the same time and repeat. And doing it this way just cuts that staining time significantly. Now I'm going to leave the ends unstained because I will be gluing these ends together, and with wood glue it's always better to glue raw wood to raw wood if possible, since that will produce a much stronger bond. Next I stain the craft sticks, then wipe out the excess. I'm going to glue 3 blocks together, and I'm going to make 17 of these. 16 will be used to make the frame for the size of the box, and 1 will be glued to the bottom middle for extra support. Now I decided to stain the wood first because the stain is dark, and I'm using wood glue, and if that seeps out, the stain just won't absorb well or evenly into the wood. Otherwise, if you want to stain after, just make sure to sand those joints well before staining, or you can just paint it or leave it natural. Once that is done, I'm going to glue the blocks together to form a square. So glue them like so, and I make 4 of these. Then I take 6 craft sticks and place them on top of the square frames, making sure they're spaced out evenly, and then I glue them down. Once the sticks are glued to all 4 squares, I form my box. Now when gluing the sides together, it's important to make sure that one side is glued in the same way or same position as the parallel side, so that when you're looking down at the box, it should be a rectangular shape and not a square, otherwise the sides are going to look uneven. Now with some help, I take some very large rubber bands and I place that around the box just to keep it snug and tight, and I just leave it alone for about 10 minutes before I carefully start working on it again. I'm going to take 6 blocks and I'm going to glue 3 on the edge like so, and this will be used to make the base. So this will actually be the bottom of the box. Then I take some glue and dab a small amount on the tip of each craft stick, then turn over and press the wide side of the block against the glue, making sure it's laying flat on the surface. And then I repeat the process on the other side. I take the 7 remaining craft sticks and measure and cut, making sure it will fit nicely inside the box, and then I glue them down, and that makes the base. I let it dry a bit, then I turn over the box and I glue down the remaining blocks right down the center of the base, and that just gives it extra support. And that is it! This came out so beautiful! It was so easy to make, and yet it looks absolutely high-end. Another one of these adhesive wall tiles from Dollar Tree, and I'll be using the gray and white decorative tile. I'm going to be applying this onto this Dollar Tree cylinder vase. I'm not going to be covering the whole thing, so I trim out the section I want with a utility knife. I peel that part out because unfortunately that sticky adhesive does not come along with it. Now you don't have to paint it, you can leave it as is, but I do want it to have a matte texture, so I'm going to be painting over it with some white Waverly chalk paint. Then with a stencil brush, I lightly go over the raised area with some black acrylic paint, and I make sure to dab out any excess paint. And then finally, to soften it up, I lightly go over the black with some white chalk paint. Towards the bottom of the vase, I'm going to be gluing about 8 tumbling tower blocks. You can glue more or less, and I'm going to be staining them in the shade Dark Walnut from Minwax, which I do outdoors. To make sure the blocks don't budge, you can use a mixture of E6000 and hot glue. I'm just going to be using hot glue. You just want to make sure your vase is clean of any dirt or grease. So I glue the blocks around the vase, and I'm gluing them on the narrower side. Again with circles, I always like to start with 4, gluing them opposite each other, and then I go from there. For the wall tile, I'm just going to glue them together on the ends. I really don't need to apply glue on the vase, but I do use some tape to hold it down while I glue it. And this vase is done. And I'm going to paint it with this Deco Art paint in the shade Seaside Blue. Now this is such a beautiful, high durability paint. It paints so nicely on wood. But because it was such a thick paint, it actually broke my foam brush. This came in a pack from Dollar Tree, but honestly, I might have just gotten a bad batch because this was the 3rd brush that broke today. So after I switched to a better brush, I apply the paint all over, and I do want it to be completely opaque. But once it was completely dried, I kind of had second thoughts about keeping it as it was. It looks stunning, and it was definitely an option to leave it painted. However, I ultimately chose to sand it down and give it a weathered look. So I took it out to sand, and I'll show you how it turned out in a moment. Now you're also going to need about 57 to 58 tumbling tower blocks, which are going to make the sides of the tray. And to hold up the wood round base, I'm going to use about the same amount of wood cubes. I did make a similar tray not that long ago with the blocks spread out. This one is going to have the blocks closer to one another side by side. Now the heights of the cube can vary depending on which side is facing up, so just make sure to double check that the heights are the same. So I glue the cube on one end of a block, and I'm going to repeat that for the remaining blocks. I want this to have a rustic finish, so I mix some antique wax with water, and this will remove the shine and give it a nice rustic finish. So here's the wood round all sanded, and now it's time to put everything together. I place a few blocks all around to hold it up first, which aren't glued yet. Now you can use your preferred glue. I actually start off with wood glue, and I do about 4 or 5 at a time. I apply the glue on the cubes, and then I push them into place. And this way I have a little more time to adjust if needed. If you want the blocks to fit nicely next to each other, you will need to leave a small gap between them. Otherwise, the size of the cubes will make it hard for the blocks to follow the curve of the wood. If the blocks aren't sticking well because the cube's slightly shorter, then I'll use the hot glue, which adds a little padding. I do add some weight on top of the wood round as I go around, and I just continue gluing until the sides are completed. Once everything was done, I did turn it over and secure the blocks even more with some hot glue. And this DIY is done. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, I'll be using this garden-themed rub-on transfer from Dollar Tree and these canvases. And these came in a pack of 3, which is the exact amount that I need. I'm going to be painting the canvases with these Waverly chalk paint. So the first one I'm going to paint in the shade Celery. And I'm using a round sponge brush to paint because it applies the paint evenly and I can avoid applying multiple layers. I make sure to get closer to the edge, but I do leave the outermost area unpainted since I plan to glue a frame on top. Once I get on that first layer, I just pounce the brush over the canvas and somehow it makes the first layer look even more opaque. For the next canvas, I'm going to paint it in the shade Sandstone. So like the first one, I apply it close to the edge and then pounce the brush to fill in any areas that went on lightly. For the last canvas, I'm going to leave it as is. I'll be making a frame using these Dollar Tree blocks. I'll be using 10 blocks to make a frame, and I just glue the blocks together like so to make a rectangle, with 3 blocks on the longer side and 2 on the shorter. I'm using hot glue since I'm just making a small frame and it's going to be glued onto a canvas. Now it's time to put it all together. I also added 3 more blocks which will hold up the frames. I'm going to stain the frame with this Deco Art Americana gel stain in the shade Walnut. But before I do that, I lightly sand the joints, and I find that doing this lightly fills in the areas where the gaps are very prominent. I'm not trying to completely cover it, it's not going to do that, but just lightly blend the joints. The sawdust gets in there and sort of very lightly fills in the gaps naturally. So just brush on the stain with a little brush all over the surface, including the inner and outer sides. And once I get that on all over, I wipe it down with a clean cloth to remove the excess stain. You can definitely paint or stain this any color you like, or even keep it natural, which I was also considering. I also make sure to stain those 3 single tumbling blocks. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using this rub-on transfer from Dollar Tree. I'll be using the gardening themed ones, which is perfect for this time of year. There's 3 of them, so I cut those out. For the sandstone canvas, I'll be applying this long one with the gardening tools. So to apply, I remove the white backing paper and I place the rub-on sheet on top of the canvas, centering it. And once it's where I want it to be, I use a little plastic scraper. This one's from Dollar Tree. You can also use a popsicle stick or a spoon, and I just go over the rub-on design several times. And then I slowly peel off the plastic paper, and if there's any areas where the transfer didn't adhere well to the canvas, I just place that plastic sheet back down and I just rub over that area until the whole transfers. For the celery green, I'll be applying the wildflower one, and I place that right in the center and I rub over the image, and you'll start to notice the image slowly separating from the plastic. And that's usually when I'll start peeling it off. And now for the third and final canvas. I'll be applying this Farm Fresh transfer with a border. So I apply that on top of the canvas, rub over the image, and gently peel off the plastic paper. I love that I left this white. Here are the 3 images. They all transferred beautifully, and I love the different colors. To glue the frame, I started off applying glue around the outer edge of the canvas. Now, I was a little concerned about applying too much glue and it seeping in the inner part of the frame, so I'm sure I went a little light with the hot glue, and unfortunately, it didn't hold. I could have tried again, but I thought I would just use another type of glue. So instead of hot glue, I'll be using Titebond multi-surface glue. So just apply that around the outer edge of the canvas, and then I placed a wood frame right on top, making sure the image is centered. Then on the back, I just glue a single block vertically towards the bottom end, and this will help the frame stand up. And this DIY is done, and I'm loving how all of these frames turned out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like these tower block DIYs. I really love how they all turned out, and I hope you do too. Until next time, bye!